Good afternoon. Welcome to Between the Pillars. I'm Liz Rodolfo, filling in for John Shoesmith, and today I have Holly Forsythe Paul here with me to talk about her upcoming exhibition. Welcome, Holly.
Thanks, Liz. It's nice to be here.
So nice to have you. Now, Holly worked with us a few years ago as a student and then later as the Nichols Library Fellow. What kind of material did you work on while you were here, Holly?
Well, to begin with, I came and I was working on the Joseph Brabant Lewis Carroll collection. I had a background teaching children's literature, so that was a really natural fit. And as time went on, I also took care of the Thomas Hardy collection, Michael Milgate Thomas Hardy collection, and after that, I started working on the short title catalog collection as well.
So you're here talking about your exhibition, which is going to be opening pretty shortly here at the Fisher. How did you come up with the idea for the exhibition, and what made you want to put together an exhibition on the subject?
Well, before I began studying in librarianship, I had a career teaching English Lit, and my area of specialization was Victorian literature. So I always had an interest in 19th century books when I was participating in classes in the book history and print culture program, and in the various programs and classes that they had at the Faculty of Information. And one thing that I felt when I was taking courses and workshops and seminars was that there was room for more research and more interest in technologies of the 19th century. A lot of the workshops that I attended were really focused on the hand press period, and they might sort of glance at William Morris, but I felt that there is a lot of room to do more research on 19th century books, and that there is a wealth of materials in the Fisher's collection that maybe isn't being explored as much as it could be.
Wonderful. So could you tell us the title of your exhibition and sort of the overarching theme?
Yeah, so one thing that came to my attention pretty early in my research was the way that technologies that were developed during the Victorian period opened up the book arts to more participants. That as new technologies emerged, more people were able to acquire skills in various aspects of the printing trade. And so the title I came up with was The Sister Arts Fashioning the Victorian Luxury Book. So I was really trying to focus on books that involved ornamentation and illustration, because I wanted to look at a broad spectrum of participants in the printing trades. So just going beyond just the compositors, the people who are just working with the press, also looking at illuminators and illustrators and engravers and other people who were involved in decorating books. So that led me to the Victorian gift books pretty early. The Sister Arts refers to a conventional way that the Victorians referred to the typical subject matter of gift books. Generally, these were books that were filled with poetry, and they also were filled with illustration. And traditionally, the Sister Arts are painting and literature. So that combination really seemed to both suggest the kind of book that was included in the exhibition, and also hint at the thesis of the exhibition and the catalog that will accompany it, which basically argues that as technology advanced, more and more women were able to find their way into the book arts in an increasing number of skill sets and specializations over the course of the 19th century, and that this particular niche in the book world had more opportunity for women than the parts of the trade that were involved with, like newspapers, periodicals, and novel publication. That the books that had more kinds of ornamentation had more opportunity for women.
So finding the women active in these fields and these periods must have been kind of difficult. What kind of difficulties did you come up against, or strategies did you use to sort of surface these participants?
I had a few books in mind before the Fisher Library and everything else closed in March of 2020, but I was really only at the very early stages of my research, and so a lot of the research that I did, I started with certain kernels. I knew that I wanted to work with ladies' albums, and that pretty quickly led me to ladies' annuals. So there were some early 19th century books that were on my radar from the beginning. And because I was interested in technology, I knew I would be looking at chromolithography and wood engraving and process block printing. And so there were some books that were important that were at the Fisher to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And when I began researching those books, the idea that these books created opportunities for women to work really first clearly emerged when I began working with Owen Jones and the Grammar of Ornament. And one of the challenges of working when the library was closed, aside from not being able to see the book in person, was that not all materials were for research, not all secondary materials were accessible. And so that led me to different researchers. I normally wouldn't have contacted them, but because of the unusual circumstances, I emailed a lot of academic researchers, and without exception, they were very generous in offering to share their materials, to send me PDFs of their articles and chapters of books. Some of them offered to have Zoom meetings to discuss their work. It was really amazing. It was a really positive experience. And so that also led me to different potential books to include in the exhibition. Talking to that many experts directly was a huge help.
So the exhibition was supposed to be mounted in January of 2021, but it sounds like the pandemic gave you an opportunity to sort of focus in a different way. So do you feel that it was a positive?
It was a hugely positive experience. I think I was very happily distracted during the shutdown. It was great to have a project that I could sink my teeth into and find fulfillment through. While everything was closed down, I was very happily occupied. I found it really encouraging and inspiring to have so much engagement and help and generosity from people that are lions in this field, and so that was really rewarding, and it was really encouraging. Even though I couldn't be at the Fisher, I would discover books that were interesting or important or landmarks online and find them on the Internet Archive or in different online collections, and almost without exception, when I looked them up in the University of Toronto Library Catalogue, the Fisher had a copy, and it was really reassuring, strangely, that even though we couldn't be here on site, that the books were fine and they were here, that the Fisher had them again and again, and so it was a really forward-looking, hopeful project to keep me going during the pandemic.
That's wonderful. Now, the exhibition is almost completely installed, so you've brought some material that you wanted to include but didn't have space to include, that sort of also illustrates some of the themes in your exhibition. Did you want to show us some of the material?
Sure, that'd be great. So, one of the books that I have in the exhibition upstairs is a welcome to Princess Alexandra. So, in this period, so we have the future King Edward, Queen Victoria's son, married Princess Alexandra of Denmark, and there are several commemorative books to celebrate the occasion. Something that we're all familiar with from sort of recent royal weddings, that there's a whole industry that pops up.
Souvenir materials, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's, I think, really relatable. And what we have in this case is a book that's based on, there's a newspaper reporter, W.H. Russell, who wrote the text, and he describes the arrival of Princess Alexandra and all of the sights in London that she passed through on her way to the royal wedding. And so we have, portraits in sort of vivid chromolithography of the people getting married, and then we have all of these fantastic images of all of the places that she went to on her first procession through London after she arrived. And then the book ends with the gifts that were given to the couple. And it's sort of page after page of fancy presents from notable people. And it's a kind of a fascinating meta book, where the book itself is intended to be a gift for its sort of middle class, well-to-do audience, and yet it's in many ways an inventory of gifts. And so I thought that was kind of fun. It's less pertinent to my interest in women creators than some of the other books. I was tracking networks very often, and so it is connected both to Owen Jones and to Matthew Digby Wyatt, who wrote a manual on making illuminations for women. And so some of the people involved in the Great Exhibition are also involved in this fabulous historical curiosity, but it's not as connected to the role of women in the print trade, so it didn't quite make it. And as you can see, this book is also in quite heavily damaged shape. It was a discard from the law library before it came here.
So yeah, it's completely off of its binding at this point.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. It's a very interesting item.
It's quite something, and it's sort of also representative of the really large books that the Victorians were able to produce once they had machine-made paper. And so we have some enormous books here that are a little bit difficult to manage because they're so big and so heavy, and this approaches that kind of scale.
Yes, anyone who comes into the exhibition will see some very large items, and several large items had to be left out just for space constraints. Did you have another item you wanted to show us?
I do. So I have another book related to the same wedding event, and this one is a really pretty project by the poet laureate Alfred Tennyson, and I don't know if you can see the silk end papers even on this. It's quite pretty. But the chromolithographs are designed and made by Owen Jones, who's the person who really figures out how to make color lithography in the 1840s. And so, the royal wedding is in 1863. Owen Jones was an architect. He was involved in the Great Exhibition, and in order to describe his theory of color, he advanced processes for printing in color using chromolithography. So he advanced the way that you could print on a stone in color, and the results are really quite remarkable.
Vivid.
Yeah, they're so bright, and there's so many different colors on a single page. This is done by using a sort of a grease pencil on a stone, and so it also has the advantage of allowing the artist a great deal of flexibility. You can write quite naturally, whereas you can imagine if you're digging into a piece of wood or digging into a piece of metal to make an illustration, it's much more difficult to have natural flow.
It definitely has a more organic feel than a lot of the earlier type illustrations.
Yeah, so these are quite lovely. Alfred Tennyson is heavily represented in the exhibition, in part because I wanted to demonstrate the relationship between canonical literature and gift books, that major mainstream poets of great popularity and sort of lasting importance were given the gift book treatment, and also because I think Tennyson's poetry tends to be really congenial to illustration. He was a famous myopic, and so he tended to hold objects really close to his face and examine them in great detail, and that comes out in the way he describes things in his poetry. So he's just naturally visual in the way that he describes things. He also wrote in narrative a great deal of the time, which also lends itself to illustration. So he's sort of, when in doubt, if I had numerous examples, I would try to stay with Tennyson, so there was some consistency in the different illustrations that we show.
It's just gorgeous.
Yeah, it's really, and it's such a different palette from what you find in medieval manuscripts. It's very clearly Victorian, and I'm especially fond of the fondness for acorns and oaks here, because I think that lends itself to a U of T context.
So this is definitely a teaser for what you can expect when you come in to see the exhibition, because it's extremely bright, a lot of vivid illustrations, very uplifting, and I think you said that you were sort of going for a generally uplifting tone in terms of your curation.
Yeah, I think all of us could use that, and I think that the story that the exhibition tells has a happy ending. That there are suffragists represented in the cases upstairs. I'm thinking of Lawrence and Clemence Hausman. Clemence was a master wood engraver who went to prison for not paying taxes as a form of protest for the restraint on her rights as a woman, and had the ability to be outspoken and contribute to that movement because of her professional activities. And by the end of her lifetime, women had the vote in England. So I think the accomplishments of the women who are represented in the cases are really impressive, and I think they're a testament to how important art can be for their makers and as a form of professional activity or of self-expression. And I also think that now that we're able to be in these spaces and be around these beautiful things, they're hopefully a testament to how fulfilled or uplifted we can be by being around such beautiful things. I think they're quite inspiring, both in what these makers were able to accomplish in their different arts, but also in what it's like to be able to come back to these spaces and be surrounded by these artifacts.
Well, thank you so much for coming in today and talking a little bit about the exhibition. The exhibition will be opening closer to the end of January. We'll have all of the details in the description box below and on the Thomas Fisher website. So thanks again, Holly, for joining us.
Thank you, Liz.
Bye, everyone.